Canada is still working on a deal with the U.S. administration on tariffs, but how much of any agreement will actually be a complete rewrite of our existing free trade deal? David Paterson is Ontario's representative in Washington. Thanks for being with us, David.
Hi, Amanda.
So this has been on my mind because we, of course, keep talking about the amount of trade that is non-CUSMA compliant. In other words, that has been hit by these now 35% tariffs. It's not very much. Should we be bracing for a future where everything we trade with America has some level of tariff? And should we start figuring out what that will cost us?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we watch the global change in trade, and as those of us in Washington are keeping a close eye on that, and also working very closely with American businesses, they respond to the new tariff levels that are out there. And we've seen this game of musical chairs, so to speak, around the world, and the countries like Japan and the EU and others agreeing to 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum, 15% on automotive, and those are too high for us. And so those of us in the CUSMA countries, we've always been a little bit different. As you mentioned, we've got the exemptions because of the CUSMA agreement. And so we need to build on that. And hopefully we can get ourselves back to 0%, but there may be a time like we have now where we've got some tariffs, and we're going to need to try and keep pushing back with U.S. business against those tariff costs.
And of course, one place where this will be central to how things develop will be the auto industry. I mean, we've had this free-flowing exchange of goods and services and supply chain between our two countries for decades and decades. As we kind of rethink that, we are already seeing the big manufacturers, David, shifting their thinking about future investments. Are we really ready for this? And I mean, of course, I ask you that because you've spent so much time in that sector. You know it intimately. This is a big one for Canada. It may not be where decades and decades from now we should pin all of our hopes, but right now, a lot of our economy and jobs are tied to it.
Well, keep in mind in the auto sector, these types of investments are usually on a 3 to 5 year horizon. We're going through a massive change towards electric vehicles, and that's not going to change. We'll continue to see companies like Ford and General Motors moving in that direction. Just this week, Ford making big announcements in Kentucky in that regard. And we have big companies like Volkswagen reaffirming that they're going to go ahead with their battery plant here in Canada. So these companies are really frustrated with tariffs because they want to get on with being more productive, using artificial intelligence, improving their supply chains, and all these things. But we have to deal with this distraction in the meantime.
And of course, also deal with, as you say, the reality of what's in front of us. Our trade teams are dealing with a White House that is extracting not just large promises, but very unusual kind of promises. You know, we've been talking about sort of the chip transaction where they're taking a piece of revenue from major chip companies and their sales to China. This is a new ballgame, David. So are we really fighting a fair fight in some ways as we try to negotiate on terms that are sort of uncertain?
It's also important to remember that, for instance, in the auto sector, Canada is by far and away the largest market for the United States in the export of automobiles. You know, we buy over 20%. Countries like Japan and Korea, maybe 1 or 2% of what America exports. So we're very important to the United States. And the big game is to compete with China in these areas. And so I think there's reason that the CUSMA countries, Canada and Mexico, are in a different category, and it's going to take longer to get to where we need to go. And it may bleed into the CUSMA type of renegotiation discussions, but we're still hopeful, and we've got a sensational team working in Washington with the ambassador and Dominic LeBlanc to try and get us to a little bit better tariff levels.
Thank you so much for your time, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Amanda.
David Paterson is Ontario's representative in Washington. Time for the takeaway on what happens when the kids are not okay. Youth unemployment in Canada is at crisis levels. One estimate suggests that at the end of last year, 850,000 young people who wanted jobs in this country couldn't find them. And that was before this summer of weak hiring made the problem even worse. There's a lot of evidence that a rough start to employment can create a permanent setback for the people involved. And for young people, this is happening in Canada at a time when the future looks precarious anyway, with new technology like AI poised to make some jobs obsolete before too long. Meanwhile, the traditional fallbacks for income, like the hospitality sector, are also suffering, closing doors for even short-term financial support. Rather than wishing it were different, there's a role for governments and business to play. Governments already have jobs and training programs for young people, but they need to be stepped up big time. Why not pay unemployed students to learn new skills, from coding to construction? And why not create a new category of tax incentives for business to hire young people who are starting their professional lives? Or, for that matter, outright grants for some category of work. The idea isn't to make government the employer of last resort, but to acknowledge that we have a shared interest in ensuring the next generation is prepared for the economy ahead. What that economy looks like is hard to predict, but arming the society of tomorrow with tools and skills to meet whatever does come is definitely the right thing to do. One thing we know about humans is we need purpose. Even paying young people to do work that is normally volunteer would be a pragmatic acknowledgement that in future, we may have an economy that hums along with fewer laborers. Innovating what we get up to could be an important part of a cohesive society. My takeaway, going out of our way to help the next generation succeed isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart one. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.